1. First, let me set up some background to make the flow of the story smoother. This happened almost 19 years ago. I was nearly 13 years old and I was being raised by my grandparents. We lived in a little tourist town in Florida. They had had problems with their 2 daughters as adults, my mother being the older of the 2, and they wanted to do everything that they could to make sure I didn't turn out the same way. A do-over, if you will. So needless to say, they were very strict. My aunt was having a good period. She had her stuff together. We were all very close. My aunt understood what it was like to be raised under a glass dome, metaphorically speaking. They raised her too, after all. So being as she was my only aunt, she made sure that the time we spent together was always super cool. I would stay over Saturday nights. We would go out and hang out on the pier, and she would let me hang out with my middle school boyfriend, who would always find ways to get to wherever I was. My grandparents had no idea of any of these activities, of course. I was just spending some quality time with my aunt and giving them a break. It was nice that I had a younger female figure since my mom wasn't around. One night when we were out having fun, my aunt meets this guy and they really hit it off. He was very nice and introduced himself to me. He went by JR, and at first was a kind of charming talker. They exchanged numbers after hanging out a while, and then we went home and went to bed. They ended up going out a bit more, and my aunt really liked JR. He took her to his home and introduced her to his father, and showed her around his land. He lived out in the woods in the middle of nowhere. I have lived in this town for 30 years, and I still to this day couldn't tell you where it is. I was only there once. He was teaching my aunt how to shoot a gun. I remember her shoulder rocking back with the impact of the shot, and it surprising her. He had these weird flamenco dancing clothes in his closet. It was all seemingly harmless. I mean, everyone has their quirks. About 10 days, maybe 2 weeks later, we were again at the pier out by the payphones, talking about what to do that night and what to get for dinner. JR and my aunt were in their late 20s, early 30s, and as much as she loved me, I imagine there were times that I got in the way. Well, anyway, we were at the pier, and he is talking about how he has these painkillers. He offered me one. I declined, of course, and told him I had a high tolerance to pain anyway, and didn't need that stuff. He then, with a huge smile, asks me if he can see for himself, assuring me that he won't really hurt me. He's just trying to have fun. The bastard twists my arm behind my back and I hear a pop. I start to cry and he laughs and says, "Aw, sweetheart, I was only playing. You said you had a high pain tolerance. Guess I was stronger than I thought I was being. I'm sorry. No need to ruin the good time we're all having." I go in the private pier office, which my granddad managed, crying. My aunt comes in and lets me know that she thinks it's fucked up too and that she talked to him about it. She goes back outside and he asks her what she is up to that night. She tells him that she isn't sure if I am staying over because with what had just happened. I was whining about going home. I was pissed that she hadn't decked him right there for hurting me. Well, he tells her that she should meet him under, let's call it the Sunset Bridge at 2 a.m. on the other side of town. He says that the stars are beautiful and you can listen and hear the fish. He tells her that he would love to see it with her, and they can dance under the moon. We were all from a fishing family and live in a fishing town, so fish activities under the bridge at late times wasn't necessarily something that threw up a red flag. If it's dark and late, there won't be people there hogging all of the fish. She tells him maybe, and we leave. I decide to spend the night after all, sneaking in only if she will pick up my boyfriend Charlie, playing up on the guilt points. She calls him when she gets home, before we made our arrangement about Charlie, and says she can come but she will have me with her. He groans and is like, "Fine, alright, I guess she can come. Maybe she will get tired and sleep in the car." About an hour after she called JR the first time, I ask about Charlie and she agrees. She sits down with me and hugs me and touches my face lovingly, apologizing for what had happened with my arm. My aunt was an amazing woman and I love her very much. She then calls him again and tells him not to worry. She is picking up Charlie, so I will have my own entertainment, and they can have their time. He goes into a rage and starts sputtering and cussing about how it's too complicated now, and he just wanted an intimate meeting with her and not a damn family reunion. He went on about how he didn't want to have to babysit a 13-year-old kid with her 14-year-old boyfriend. He hangs up after calling her a crazy bitch. She bewilderingly hangs up the phone and tells me what happened. We go about our night with pizza rolls and PlayStation, and things are fine. He calls her a few more times and drives by the house for a couple of weeks. But my aunt was having none of it. After a while, he left our lives just as swiftly as he had came. The whole affair only lasted a month, if even that. 3 weeks, maybe, and, all in all, it wasn't the craziest experience she has had with a man. JR was soon forgotten, and we went about our business. Flash forward 2 years later. I am almost out of middle school. My aunt had moved to a city about 40 miles away. I still lived with my grandparents. They were still strict, but as they had gotten older, so had I. I had a few ways around the rules. One day my friend Frank and I missed the bus home from school and called our good high school friend Darla to pick us up and take us home after riding a bit. She had this big, beautiful red truck, and I would ride around in the cab of it, loving the freedom and the wind. We were smoking cigarettes and laughing and listening to the radio. The time I would have spent on the bus before my stop was just enough time to hit up the taco drive-thru. We cruised down the road a bit before heading back to Frank and I's separate houses. He lived just down the road. We had a lot of fun that day. She dropped me off first. My grandparents came outside. They were heavily confused at the sight of an unknown vehicle, and even more so when they saw that I had gotten out of it. After letting her be the one to explain because she was older, cooler, and more responsible, my parents thanked her for being kind enough to take me home. They said how lucky I was that she just happened to be there to help me get home. Things we do to our parents, eh? That was the last time we ever saw my friend. She didn't show up for work for 5 days. I can't speak for everyone, but I assumed she just ran away. Darla's parents were going through a nasty divorce. The dad had a hot new girlfriend, and the mother was very bitter about it. Rightfully so, I guess. It was embarrassing for all of the kids. Her truck wasn't left behind. I figured she got tired of her parents acting like infants and took off. I missed her, but she was in a whole other league of freedom and coolness. 16 is a whole lot different than 14, especially when you were in different schools. I wished her well, maybe even a little envious that she got out of this town and I was still here. I hadn't heard anything for 2 weeks about her. When, at about 9 at night, my grandparents got a phone call to turn on the news. Darla's body was found out in the woods. She had been strangled to death and just left out there. I don't even know for how long. I was devastated. I was so joyful that I had that last experience with her, but so saddened and horrified. She was so young, barely older than myself. She was about to be 17 in just a short time. It was a very sad time for our town. The good and the bad news is that they caught the guy that had done it. He confessed after some very incriminating evidence, and during his questioning, also confessed to killing his girlfriend who had been missing for about 8 years, and also his father, staging his death to look like a suicide by hanging. When they showed his mugshot on the screen and said his name, I swear I almost passed out. There, clear as day on the screen, staring back at me, was a picture of JR. I had no idea they even knew each other. I can't even imagine what would have happened if we had gone under the bridge that night. Investigation Discovery Channel did a piece on it a couple of years back. I was shocked to see it on the TV. The memories came rushing back, and I decided to write them all down. I literally have a newfound appreciation of life now that I'm old enough to understand just how close I could have come to being killed. My aunt lived on to make awesome new memories with me. I have a beautiful life with my husband and 3 boys that most likely wouldn't have happened if things had gone differently that night. 2. This happened about a year ago. I had Tinder and I made a promise to myself to never meet up with anyone. I had used it simply to boost my self-esteem with a little bit and not feel so gross. One day I see someone that I knew, let's call him John. He was my brother's friend and had even been to my house a couple times when we were younger. We matched and I thought, oh, how cool. We started talking and everything seemed fine. He asked a couple times if we could meet up and go for a drink or get coffee sometime, and whenever someone asked this, I would always dodge. One day I'm finishing up babysitting some kids and make a decent amount of cash. He sends me a message asking if I wanted to go get some drinks platonically, so I figured, what the hell. Worst comes to worst, I can get out of my house for a little bit. He gets to my house and waits outside my door. We walk to his car and he even opens up the door. I've never really done anything like this at all with any guys, so this seemed really nice. John tells me we're going to a local suburb to go to some good bars and get to know each other. Everything is going well, he's relatively charming and goofy. He makes a comment that I'm very quiet, which is because I suffer with anxiety, and I'm not very good in social situations. When we arrive at the bar, some of his friends are there, and we all hang out as a group, which makes me feel even better. We drink a little, and hop to another bar. As we drive there, he wants to play 21 questions, which is code for I'm a douche who is about to ask you if you're a virgin, like we're 12. John starts to ask the questions that we would all imagine comes up, and I answer because whatever, we're all adults here. But I don't have any flirtatious tone, I speak sternly. He asks if I have ever had a massage, and I say no, and he says, "Oh, I'll give you one." I tell him that I'm okay, but he proceeds to put his hand on my knee and roam. I push him off and say no thanks. We get to the bar and I'm very uncomfortable, and I have anxiety, so I decide at this point I'm just going to entertain him a little longer as we just walked in, and ask to go home in a little bit. I mention that I like chicken nuggets at some point, and he offers to get me some, and duh. Of course I say yes, because I may as well get something out of this. I go out for a cigarette and he comes with. He tries to kiss me and I very quickly put my hand up and tell him that I would rather not. He persists and I continue to say no. We go to the McDonald's across the street from my school and I eat 2 nuggets and I'm ready to go home because he is giving me weird vibes. John then asks, "Want to go drifting in the school parking lot?" Which made me laugh so hard in my head. I say no and he says, "No, it will be fun, I'll show you." We start drifting and I say a couple more times that I'm ready to go. And then he says that he won't take me home unless I give him a kiss. I tell him no and he says that it's too cold for me to walk, so I may as well do it. I'm very uncomfortable, so I offered my cheek and he persists and says that he meant he wants to make out. I state I don't want to once again and he locks the door. I very quickly kiss him as I don't know what I'm supposed to do in this situation. And he grabs me and let his hands roam. I push him off and tell him that maybe next time I will kiss him the way he wants. He takes me home and I cry the rest of the night. I told my brother and he immediately told me that he heard John was a creep and had issues with the word no. I'm glad I got home safe, but I know I will never go out with someone from Tinder. I thought I would be safe because I technically knew this person, but I was wrong. I blocked him on all social media and haven't heard from him since. Unfortunately, this was the second occasion something awful like this has happened to me. But that's another story for another day. John, I hope we never meet again. Thanks for listening. It felt kinda good to get out. Edit. I just thought I should say something real quick. I'm very antisocial, and because of this, I don't really know how to interact in many situations. I let my severe anxiety get in the way a lot of the time. I do recognize that a lot of this is things I did wrong, but I do try to learn from it and be more careful. Unfortunately, in this situation, I was more worried about coming off rude or pissing someone off. In retrospect, I know this is my shitty mind, but I try to trust my gut. It's a work in progress. Thanks for the advice, everyone. 3. I was 23 years old, in grad school, working towards my MLIS, and working part-time at the West Valley Library. I wasn't paid much at West Valley, so I applied for a position at the larger Stone River Library System, SRLS, and was hired there. The new position required me to work hours at the Crestmont and Cherry Lane branches, but I continued working at West Valley too. My first shift with Stone River Library System was a Monday night at the Cherry Lane branch. I didn't need much training because I was already familiar with the software they used and working with the public. But one of my new co-workers was explaining some of the unique policies this library had, when a patron came up and asked where he could find books about World War II. My co-worker asked if I could handle the question, and I said I could. Before the co-worker walked away, he jokingly said to the patron, "Take it easy on her, she's new." This patron was heavy-set and looked to be in his mid to late 40s. I told him he'd want to look at the 940s in the adult non-fiction section, and he wandered away, but several minutes later he came back. He said he was having trouble finding the section and that maybe I could help him find the specific book he wanted. I started searching our system for the title he requested. He then introduced himself to me as Jim and extended his hand over the desk to shake my hand. I awkwardly shook his hand and went back to searching for the book. He was acting overly familiar with me, and he was very talkative, telling me all about himself. Patrons being overly familiar and talkative isn't really unusual in public libraries. Often people come to the library just to have someone to talk to, so we're conditioned to listen to people talk as we work, as long as it doesn't interfere with providing assistance to other patrons. We didn't own the title he was looking for, but I told him I could place a hold on it and have it sent here from another library. I placed the hold and told him he would get a phone call when the book arrived here for him. He then told me that the phone number on his account was his home phone number, but he would prefer that we call his cell phone. I offered to change the phone number for notifications to his cell phone number. He said he didn't want to do that because his wife wants calls about her books at home. He then suggested that instead, I could take his cell phone number and call him personally when his book arrives. This was a really strange request. I told him I couldn't do that because I don't handle the items arriving from other libraries, and I'm only here very part-time hours. He attempted a sad puppy dog face and said,
"Come on, please, for me."
I told him the best I could do was change the number on his account to his cell phone. He declined and didn't press the issue any further. He then asked if I could show him the 940s in adult nonfiction. I walked across the library to the 940 section with him. I don't remember our exact conversation in the stacks, but he was clearly trying to flirt with me at some point. He said something along the lines of,
"You look so young, but you seem to really know what you're doing. Hard to believe you're new here."
I told him I'm new to this library system, but I've worked at another library nearby for several months, and I also work at another branch of this library system. He then dropped all pretense of looking for World War II books and started grilling me with personal questions. I sidestepped the questions as best as I could and completely made up the few things I did tell him. But I've always had trouble politely disengaging from uncomfortable conversations like this. After 15 minutes, I told him that the library was really busy tonight, and I needed to get back to the circulation desk. As I turned to walk out of the aisle, he grabbed my wrist to stop me. He held it very tightly and said,
"You should give me your phone number."
I was completely shaken that he touched me, and I wasn't concerned about being polite anymore. I semi-screamed, "No, I'm not interested," and yanked my arm out of his grasp. I power-walked back up to the circulation desk and into the staff room, where I then caught shit from the supervisor on duty for disappearing for almost 20 minutes. By the time my chat with the supervisor was over, Jim had left the library. I quickly went back to the computer where I placed the hold for him, opened the transaction log, and opened his library account from there. I wrote down his card number, his full name, and address. The next day was my first day of work at the Crestmont branch. It was uneventful. Thursday, I worked at the Crestmont branch again. When I arrived, the supervisor told me that someone called looking for me on Wednesday, but didn't want to leave a message. I had no idea who it could have been and shrugged it off. Later that day, a coworker told me that there was someone on the phone for me. I picked up the call and it was Jim. He said that he was just calling to talk. This had the hair in the back of my neck standing up, because I realized that he must have been the person who called looking for me yesterday. I told him that I can't just talk to people on the phone while I'm at work, and not to call here again. He said if I gave him my cell number, he would call me when I'm not at work and we could talk. I told him again that I'm not interested and hung up the phone. The supervisor overheard this. I explained what happened at the Cherry Lane branch, and she wrote up an incident report about everything, which she sent to the director of SRLS and the supervisors at all 4 branches. Friday afternoon, the director of SRLS calls me at home. He told me that Jim had apparently called all 4 SRLS branches on Wednesday and showed up at one branch trying to find me and asking where and when I would be working next. The director emailed me a letter, drafted by SRLS's lawyer, that he planned to send to Jim and asked me to read it over and make sure everything was accurate. The letter summarized the incidents from Cherry Lane on Monday and Crestmont on Thursday, warned Jim that library patrons are not permitted to interfere with a library employee while she is performing her duties, and went on to say, if it were not apparent from the employee's tone of voice, I want to make it clear that your personal attention directed at her is unwanted. It is expected that you will not continue to seek out interactions with this employee. All future interactions you have with library employees will be based upon library services and will not become personal. Failure to comply with this warning will result in you being banned from the Stone River Library System for a period of time commensurate with your misconduct. I told the director that I thought this might be a little bit harsh because I could just be overreacting about the whole situation, but he said that everything about Jim's interactions with me had been inappropriate, and he wanted to stop it in its tracks. I agreed he should send the letter. On Sunday, I worked at the West Valley Library. Shortly after the library opened, I answered a phone call and it was Jim. I was shocked and scared because I never told him that I worked at this library. He said he really wanted to see me and that if we wouldn't talk on the phone, he would come to the library and we could talk in person. I wanted to be completely clear, so I told him that I was sorry if I gave him the wrong impression, but I'm not interested in talking to him on the phone or in person or ever again at all. He started saying things like,
I thought you were a good person. You seem so nice. You shouldn't treat me like this.
I said I have to go and hung up the phone. A co-worker who overheard the conversation convinced me to file a police report just in case. The police arrived shortly after that, and I sat down with them and went over everything. They told me they were going to stop by Jim's house the next day to speak with him about the situation, and see where things stand, and that if I see him following me anywhere, I should call 911 immediately. Monday night, I worked at the Cherry Lane branch again. I was kind of nervous that Jim might come in, since he knew I would be working there, and because he had probably just received a warning letter from my boss and a visit from the police, but he didn't show up. My co-workers and I walked to the staff parking lot together after closing, and as we approached our cars, I saw that my car's hood was popped. When we got closer, I saw that all 4 windows plus the front and rear windshields had been smashed in. There were also dozens of deep dents to the metal panels and cracks and holes punched through the bumpers and other plastic sections of my car. Inside, it looked like someone had poured bleach all over the black cloth seats. Before I could even process what I was looking at, my legs stopped supporting me. I collapsed onto the blacktop, and I immediately threw up. This is the first and only time in my life I've experienced actual panic. My co-workers hoisted me back up, and half ran, half dragged me back into the library where they called 911. When the police arrived, I told them about Jim. They located Jim's car several blocks away, and inside it they found empty bleach containers, a hammer, and a full set of his clothing: shoes, socks, pants, underwear, a t-shirt, and a sweater. When they visited his house, his wife told the police he was at a local bar watching a football game. The police were never able to locate Jim, and as far as I understand, he never returned to his house or his wife. I didn't stick around to find out, though. Over the next 2 days, I quit both of my jobs, dropped out of school, broke my apartment lease, and moved several hundred miles away. But now I carry pepper spray. I'm a black belt in Krav Maga, and I don't run from threats anymore. So Jim, let's meet the fuck up. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 372. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Gonna keep the outro short here, although one thing I was wondering is, it may be different in the American library system, but here in the UK, your library card is your card. So that shifty creeper in the last story there, quite obviously was up to no good from the get-go, I think, because surely it shouldn't be a problem to change the phone number associated with it. Unless there's such a thing as a couple's card, but I'd never heard of that before. Okay, anyway, I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.